I did want to pivot a little bit to some of the work of the ACLJ. As we said, as school season kind of kicked back in, and now we're honestly headed towards the back quarter of the year in terms of your semesters. A lot of people are just back from fall break. You're going to have Christmas coming up, Thanksgiving, holidays. And with that, we know comes a lot of conversations and maybe a lot of issues at schools. And sometimes it involves the teachers. Sometimes it involves the teachers doing the right thing and being punished or reprimanded for just stating very obvious facts or being, promoting kindness. And that is sort of what happened here. We had a teacher who it was the morning after or of the Charlie Kirk assassination. It just came up in her class. People were talking about it. Obviously, it became something that people were addressing. And with that, they started talking about people who had been murdered, who had been assassinated for their beliefs, whether it was their political beliefs or their religious beliefs or whatever it may be.
Well, and this teacher was actually teaching curriculum that was approved by the school board, all of this entire curriculum was approved because this was on this day. It's an 8th grade history teacher in Hawaii. Federally funded schools that receive federal funds, have to teach about the Constitution on Constitution Day. That's a part of the federal law. So this was a curriculum talking about the Bill of Rights that had been approved to be taught. And they were talking about the First Amendment and talking about free speech. And the teacher was talking about how there is a difference between what is protected speech and not protected speech. A student.
This wasn't even a very controversial conversation.
It wasn't even about controversy.
We should tell people how it went down. So on this, she talked about that one, even hate speech on Constitution Day, which she says is protected to an extent. Like we don't have laws against hate speech like other countries, and that it's protected to an extent before it becomes incitement. Incitement's not. But again, we're talking to kids here, and it prompted a student, not the teacher. A student then raised their hand and referenced Charlie Kirk being killed for freedom of speech, for talking. And then the teacher just asked students to name other figures in American history.
Yeah, in somewhat pivoting.
Right.
Actually, pivoting the conversation. Pivoting to history. So brought up
Didn't have
JFK,
a discussion
brought
about
up
him.
Martin Luther King Jr.
Abraham
Lincoln. So they're having conversations. And in that conversation, someone mentioned the attempted assassination of President Trump, a student. And another student responded with something to the effect of, well, that wouldn't have been such of a bad thing.
Right.
And of course, that's an abhorrent thing to say about anyone that you hoped that assassination. Clearly, I mean, I'm sure we can know where that student's parents are politically. And the teacher's response was just to, again, de-escalate the situation.
Speech. You can't call for someone to die. That's not hate speech.
Yeah,
that's what I was talking about before.
We don't want anyone to be killed for their speech. And here's why. And gave what appears to be a very nuanced, bipartisan, not a political speech by any means.
A Republican or a Democrat, easily, or someone who's not even political.
A teacher who just doesn't want to really engage in
bring it
politics.
up on their own. This teacher did not bring this topic on herself.
So here's what happens. The school has a meeting with the social studies department, and in front of everybody says that there have been some incidents in certain classes that will be addressed, but teachers are not allowed to discuss, quote, controversial issues, and if that is brought up by a student, it must be shut down. Now, then later, the teacher was called into a one-on-one meeting with the administration, and the vice principal told the teacher that a parent of a student who wasn't even in the class called to complain and made it all about Charlie Kirk, not about the entire discussion and the things that were said even about President Trump. So then
Which was really the moment of the shutting or moving on the conversation and having a discussion was actually about a student responding that it wouldn't have been bad for President Trump to have been assassinated. And clearly he was deciding to end this conversation and just say, no, that's not how we do things here in America.
So the teacher gets a summary of the conference memo stating what the issue is, a reprimand placed into their file, and that if controversial issues arise spontaneously without administration approval and parent notification, discussion must be put to a stop immediately. Failure to comply with the above directives may result in disciplinary action. So this is silencing free speech. It's silencing academic freedom, and we are not going to let this go through. We have now sent a demand letter to the Department of Education in Hawaii that this be removed from the teacher's file, that they support and promote the First Amendment and the freedoms that are here. But there are so many constitutional violations here, Jordan, that they're the chilling effect on free speech.
It also just
it's
doesn't feel
ridiculous.
all that controversial. It's not all that controversial that the news of the day is going to come up, and as a teacher, you have to know how to present the at least to respond appropriately. And what I'd like about this case, and sometimes, you have teachers that go rogue and do teach things that I think are very inappropriate, was this teacher really did the best they could to settle down the situation and move forward. But because likely it had to do with President Trump or Charlie Kirk or conservative-leaning people.
What was she supposed to do then?
Right.
She did pivot.
Yeah, no, they pivoted. As teachers, they pivoted. And exactly, even the demand was kind of what was met, but that wasn't good enough. And that is clearly because of the topic.
Well, it's unconstitutionally vague, the directive, saying if something arises that's controversial, how subjective is that right there, Jordan? Just saying, you can't talk about the American Revolution, or anything in American history.
Slavery in America,
because
the founding of our country.
Deemed controversial.
The protest movement for women's their right to vote, the Constitution, the 3/5 provision. All these things that you should be learning about in history class as you go up in age could be deemed controversial 10 different ways. Our history itself has controversies. It's not, as our founding fathers knew, we're not perfect. We're going to strive to be the best we can be as a country in the world, and I think we are. But that means always striving towards getting better and trying to pursue happiness, never really reaching full happiness, but pursuing happiness as a goal instead of pursuing just power and government strength. But this idea, again, of just these schools going overboard, what will happen is we'll just have no history taught. Is that what they want?
That kind of has happened before.
Except for America's Bad.
Remember that happened a few years ago where during COVID, it was like history classes got put on pause in Chicago because they were like, we don't know what kind of history is being taught here. With that being said, the ACLJ doesn't stop. And what is next is what is important, which is, of course, we are representing this teacher at zero cost to them because people like you donate and support. And that's great because you never know when you're going to need it yourself, because likely this teacher would not be able to afford, especially the legal minds that we have here, when you're able to be represented by the best of the best. But Jordan, I guess we could say what that next step is.
Yeah, so what we're doing is they have a November 6th deadline to reply to our demand letter that says you remove the memo and that confirmation that teachers will not be forced to silence students during approved lessons, and that instruction on constitutional rights will not be deemed controversial. So they can avoid a lawsuit.
2 weeks.
They have until November 6th. After that, we'll decide whether to file a formal complaint with the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, if they want to take it to the Trump
bring it on.
DOE. Bring that on.
Bring it on. With that, we want you to support the work of the ACLJ.